Okay, man, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Now, come on, now crank this motherfucker up.
Break it down like this.
Hello, Internet. Gino, the Ambrosia Gold here again with another episode of Deep Listens. And today it is time once again to get on that ranking of fantasies. We've started a new Final Fantasy. It's time for us to discuss Final Fantasy VI, which means I am joined, as always, by Chris ZombiePie Redacted. Hello.
The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup. Hey, everybody. I'm caffeinated. That's not going to be a hazard or a problem for this podcast in any way, shape, or form, and not going to cause Gino to have a fit.
It's fine. We're also joined by someone who joined in on this terrible, terrible blood pact late in the game, Jeff Rude. Hello, Jeff.
Hi, I'm back. We just finished recording a episode of the Off the Deep End spin-off show about an RPG that is worse than Final Fantasy VI called Suikoden. And yeah, playing that as well as every other RPG I have touched in my lifetime just keeps reminding me how good Final Fantasy VI actually is.
It's like when we played Chrono Cross, and it's like, hey, man, remember Chrono Trigger? Remember how good Chrono Trigger is? Remember how this game is in no way, shape, or form as good as Chrono Trigger?
Yeah, and then we were like, hey, sister-daughter clone.
Baby-daughter clone.
Baby-daughter clone. And he was like, okay, this game has merits. It's got chutzpah.
That's the thing you can say about it. The chutzpah factor is high.
I look forward to all of us using Final Fantasy VI as a benchmark, like the rest of the internet and the Final Fantasy fandom, where it's like, oh, you know, this Final Fantasy 9, it's good, but it's not Final Fantasy 6. Oh, this Final Fantasy 10, fucking shit to Final Fantasy 6. Like, we're going to become those people?
Yeah, it's just all people who were teenagers.
Look, I am one of these people. You're talking
What's it like? What's it like?
It sucks.
What's it like to compare everything that you play today to these old clammy clam classics?
Yeah, I'm not that bad. We'll get it.
No, I have a story to tell when we play Final Fantasy IV, but I think I've even told my story before, but
I'm not sure.
Well, today's not as good as the day I got married to my best friend, so it sucks. Like, it's a shitty way to live your life, you know?
Yeah.
all I will say is that during the twilight early years of Final Fantasy or Giant Bomb, we had a constant back and forth war between the Final Fantasy VI and the Final Fantasy IV crowd. Constantly. And the reason for it was because of the after years was going to come out. And so all the Final Fantasy IV people got like militarized and were on the forum saying, yo, our game's better. Our game's so good it's getting an expansion pack for the DS after the fact. And Final Fantasy VI fans were like, our game's better, bitch. Fucking,
it's just better.
You don't need to expand from the game. And then after years came out and the Final Fantasy IV fans, shut the fuck up.
The monkey's paw.
Look, I have to know that Theodore exists because I know about the trading card game, but I shouldn't have to. It would be best if I didn't know that. So before we get into Final Fantasy VI, just a reminder, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com.
Oh, shit, I forgot. Before I do my food bit, this is going to fucking blow your goddamn mind.
Before you do that, what if I finish the plug?
Go ahead. I have to get something real quick. I'm sorry.
No problem. At DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections and deeplistenspodcast at gmail.com. That's the email where you can write in emails. You can also support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens, where if you were to do so, you would get access to our Discord, where we just had a viewing party of the Silent Hill movie, where we all watched that and talked through it. We all shared our emotions. So
was it emotional?
It was mostly, this is fine.
That's competently made. I missed the viewing party because of life reasons, but yeah, it's a good. My favorite part of that movie is when Pyramid Head rips the skin off of a person and throws their corpse at the protagonist.
It throws the skin at the wall at the door.
Yeah,
it's like that's pretty raw. My favorite part is the first time a monster shows up, and then the movie gets worse from there. It's a shame that's 30 minutes in. So ZP, I hear you have a bit.
No, yeah, I have a bit, but I have a comment.
Okay.
From a one YouTube comment. This is from a now almost year-old archive of our questing in Final Fantasy XI when I streamed this, a 5-hour-long fucking thing. Someone commented in the video, and I have to read this. There's no bad words here, but anyways, this is from Aaron Pitt. You dudes just made a video of you playing a game you wanted to trash talk about. Calling all of the mechanics here gobbledygook for 13-year-olds? Fucking, you guys don't even know. The interface you're talking smack about and even your friends is old as hell and was way before World of Warcraft. More like Craft of Warcraft was even born and wore diapers and shit itself every day while people were playing it. This is a classic, and your objective outlook on this game is trash. And I want you to tell this to your other friends that were talking smack about Final Fantasy XI too, because you're all spoiled babies that has had everything handed to you. It's old. Get over it. It's still way better than World of Warcraft LMAOA. Thanks, Aaron Pitt, for your wonderful contributions to a now year-old archive of us playing Final Fantasy XI.
Good shout out to LMFAO in there. I can't emphasize this enough. I'm old enough to have played 11 when it came out the first time. I played it when it was new.
Ceteris paribus, we're all older than this person.
Yes, almost certainly. We have almost certainly all played this game in context. I played it with Star Wars Galaxies. I played it. My friend had World of Warcraft. I compared those games. I
remember being a high schooler, and a friend in track and field was talking about how excited he was to go home and play the new expansion on his PlayStation 2. Man. I was there, dude.
Yeah, I was there and played it, and I can tell you, this game was Byzantine at the time. At the time, it was weird. I'm going to put an object into my inventory and then drag it over an NPC. No, first I'm going to engage in the trade dialogue, and then I'm going to drag an item over an NPC to trade them the item, and then start the dialogue so that I can move on to the next part of the quest. That was fucking weird. All of it was always weird. It's gotten more weird over time because they've stapled more normal mechanics onto it.
I want to shout out the person who does modifications on my consoles, Krista Lee, Pup on Twitter, recently went down a Final Fantasy XI hole with some friends, and clearly she's a person who enjoys that game, and more power to them. I admire how stubborn that game has clung to its conventions over 20 years.
Yes.
That's genuinely impressive. And up until recently, it remained the most profitable game that company has ever made. Final Fantasy XIV apparently just eclipsed it in the last 2 months. But think about that. Yeah. That's a game that is
we also talk about how they're charging money for this fucking game when you can play almost all of Final Fantasy XIV for free.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's...
So, I don't know. Final Fantasy XI. I'm not playing it anymore. I refuse to. And I'm not going to sit here and say I enjoyed all of it, but I look back on it with this mixed feeling, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, it's better than 13.
Yeah, it's when you have tapeworms, you don't like it because they're stealing your nutrition, but also you lose some weight. And you're like, wow, I was pretty thin when I had a tapeworm.
I mean, it's got to be. I think I talked to Braden about this. Because he was the first person that it's do I delete this comment? Which I eventually did delete because the person was being shitty to the other people in the comment section, which said, "Hey, if you ever want to come back, here are my recommendations." If someone offered to lead me through the game in the comments, and it's you know what? Thank you.
Adorable.
I'm not going to play this fucking game anymore, but also thank you. And so I deleted their comment. But anyways, I mean, when you play a game like that for fucking however long, of course you're going to get defensive about this game. And if there is a big regret, I think that I talked to you, Gino, about it. I kind of do regret how I ended the blog series for Final Fantasy XI, in which I call out the fans of that game. But I stand by the fact that it is incomprehensible, and there's no reason for you to play Final Fantasy XI in the year of our Lord 2020 back then, or 2021. There's no reason. If you're already invested with the community, you've got friends that are entrenched in this thing, fucking whatever. I'm not going to yuck your yams, whatever the fuck that saying is. It's just, don't try to convince me that there is a reason for me to play it today.
Yes, if you want to go in there and have a good old time, that's fine. Look, there are people running OG WoW servers.
There are people playing Anarchy Online Legacy servers. Like, fucking whatever. We're not going to tell. Like, people still play RuneScape. RuneScape's like a top 5 MMO still to this day.
There are MUD communities from the early and mid 90s that are still active, which is crazy. Like,
that's fine. But, like, you know.
But, like, to
it's not fun to play.
That your game is something, and this is the reason why I want to call out this comment, to suggest that your game is somehow superior to modern versions of the MMORPG format is just, it's a lie. That's a lie.
You have gotten high on your own supply.
Anyways, food bit. Because I knew that this would be, let's say, a little toxic, I ended up doing something that hopefully is approved by the Politburo of Vegetable Eaters. So I once told...
Oh, this wasn't even the full bit. Oh, no.
No, I have a food bit. There's a food bit. Gino,
okay,
who am I?
Fine.
Who am I?
Do your
Here's the deal.
I
did something that... No, it's not evil. This is not an evil food bit. So I once told my a person that I'm trying to get familiar with, and that's all I'll say, that I'm not a huge fan of apples.
Okay.
It's not that I hate apples. I just consider kind of them like a low-tier fruit. I just find the skin part of the apple to be my least favorite part, and everyone's like, "That's all. That's where all the nutrition is." And she recommended that maybe I try different cultivars because I admitted that I've only eaten maybe 3 different varieties of apples:
What?
Red Delicious, Granny Smith, and Fuji.
Okay, Fuji's a high-tier apple.
Yeah,
Granny Smith.
Red Delicious is trash, and
Red
Granny
Delicious
Smith
is trash.
is really good for pies.
Yeah, Granny Smith is polarizing as an eating apple.
You bake with it. It's a baking apple. So I bought 3 different apples that I've never tried before. I bought a Yellow Delicious because I hate the Red Delicious, and I want to see if it compares favorably. I bought the one that was recommended to me the most. I bought a Honey Crisp.
Yep, that's what I was going to say.
And then I bought an Ambrosia Gold.
Okay. No Pink Lady?
They didn't have them. I did ask.
Okay, Pink
so
Ladies are
let's
good.
try the Yellow Delicious.
Okay, so you get to eating. Jeff, what is your stance on the Yellow Delicious apple? Let's get the temperature take in the room before ZP weighs in on the official.
As the representative of the state that produces more apples than any other in the country, potatoes as well. Fuck Idaho. I am not familiar. The thing I have had is one of the Cosmic Crisp apples, and they're fine. But if you blind taste tested me a Cosmic Crisp and a Honey Crisp, I couldn't tell you the difference.
So my stance on the Yellow Delicious is it's a very mediocre apple. Like, it's fine, but it doesn't have very distinct qualities anyway.
No.
It usually is fairly mushy, I find, the texture.
Mine's is crispy, but I can see how like this becomes like a mealy, mushy Red Delicious.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not as
very
bad as Red
mild. I'm going to give
clear,
this a
Red Delicious ass tier apple.
It's the best looking apple, but the worst tasting apple.
They're unbelievably bad.
There's actually a really good article on why the Red Delicious is a bad apple, but this is okay. It doesn't have a good flavor. I mean, it's an okay flavor. It's a mild, soft flavor. It doesn't stick around. I would not take this over a Fuji, nor would I take this over any of the other apples other than maybe Red Delicious. But
yes, it compares favorably.
It's fine
with Red Delicious for sure.
Okay, let's try, because everyone said that the Honey Crisp would be my favorite one.
Probably.
So let's try Ambrosia Gold.
I have seen Ambrosia Gold sold. I have never had one, so I am intrigued here.
Okay.
I make mead, and last year I made a Sicer style mead, which is you take honey and instead of combining it with water, you combine it with apple cider. It's good.
How's the Ambrosia?
It tastes like a very mild apple juice.
Ooh.
It tastes like actual apple juice. You know how apples don't ever taste like apple juice?
Yes.
This tastes like actual apple juice, a very mild, liquidy, pleasant flavor. I like this significantly more than the Yellow Delicious.
Okay.
The sugary apple there.
Now let's go to Honeycrisp.
I would say, though, the one thing about Ambrosia, because I had a grandmother who liked Ambrosia salad,
Hell yeah.
it is a very sweet apple. If you like
Yeah.
tart, citrusy apples, the Ambrosia is probably not going to be for you.
All right, now let's cut over to the Honeycrisp.
Okay. I'm going to take a little swish of water to get the flavor out so that I cleanse the palate.
I am,
Honeycrisp,
I think, the youngest person in the world who likes ambrosia salad.
probably. I've never had one.
Oh, they're incredible.
I like ambrosia. I like ambrosia dessert. Just
Yeah.
the salady thing, I could give or take. But if it's done correctly, it's done very well.
My mother would make a
Honeycrisp.
cranberry ambrosia salad for Thanksgiving every
Alright.
year. I still
Honeycrisp is a genetically engineered apple, engineered to be the best tasting apple.
Oh my goodness.
How does science taste?
This is amazing. It's like got a floral mouthfeel.
Yeah.
I'd like to pause on that point briefly. So when people say science made these apples, such as the Cosmic Crisp, the Honey Crisp, they are in fact just hard-working students and people at Washington State University for the most part, just crossbreeding apples.
Yep.
It's not like they, took a computer and genetically built an apple.
They didn't take the DNA from a squid and put it into this apple to make it taste
Yeah.
better.
People have in fact been crossbreeding
Eat my-
cultivars of apples for thousands
Like
of years.
the University of Minnesota owns, I read, the Sweet Tango apple. This is fucking amazing. Holy shit.
Yeah, the Honeycrisp apple is it's a true feat of horticultural science. They did an excellent job crossbreeding to make that apple.
If this is what GMOs can do, fuck all these organic assholes. Fucking give me more of this shit. Holy shit.
They're just good about crossbreeding. That's it. That's the secret.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so a Cosmic Crisp is that and something else that is muddled together. And like I said, I bet if you blind tested me, I might not tell the difference, but people seem kind of jazzed about the Cosmic Crisp.
I'm gonna eat a little bit of the ambrosia is significantly sweeter.
Then the Honeycrisp?
Oh, it's like a very flatter sweetness, like a very sugary sweetness. The Honeycrisp has like a floral, like almost like a, oh my god, that is like actual like cider, apple cider, whereas the ambrosia is more of like an apple juice.
Yeah, the Honeycrisp, the first time I had ever eaten one, I was like, what the fuck have I been eating my entire life?
Yeah.
But
Holy
also,
shit.
worth mentioning, Honeycrisps, I don't believe are, because of they're so sweet, they have a higher sugar content than other apples, which makes them maybe less healthy.
Whatever.
But
There's
also-
lots of different metrics to measure healthy. you know?
Exactly.
Like, let's say it's nutritionally dense, right? You know?
Yep.
Anyways,
Closing
okay,
thoughts.
I forgot. The ambrosia was a 4. The Honeycrisp is a 5 out of 10, or like 10 out of 10.
10 out of
5
10.
out of 5, yeah. The Honeycrisp is good. Yellow Delicious is a 3. Ambrosia, it's an acquired taste, but it's like a 3.5 to 4. But that Honeycrisp is holy shit.
Well,
There
next
you go,
time,
science.
let's get him to have like a rutabaga.
What's
You
a
know?
rutabaga?
Oh boy.
Have you ever had a Kalamata olive?
I love Kalamatas.
Okay, good.
Olives suck shit. They're terrible.
Go to hell. All right. So now let's get into Final Fantasy VI. This
What's
podcast.
the difference between a rutabaga and a turnip?
They are different
lot.
tubers.
Yeah.
Like, what's the difference between a potato and a rutabaga? Or a
One's
carrot?
good and one tastes like shit.
Final Fantasy VI. Jeff, you love this game. What is it about? What's its deal?
God, okay. This is the one.
Yeah.
This is my special boy.
Wait, no. Your special boy repeatedly have said, I will bring a knife to this fight when we rank Final Fantasy VI, but you have repeatedly said you will bring a fucking gun when we do tactics. So it's your special cousin. More like
No, this trumps tactics.
What? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not denying I said that about tactics, and I do find that very good. But I didn't imprint on tactics. Like, you know, when the wolf in Twilight sees the baby and is like, I'm gonna marry that baby.
What?
Stick
I
with
don't know.
me.
I don't know what this is a reference.
I don't know
to.
what Twilight is. What's the Twilight?
Okay.
Oh, Twilight, right?
Yeah,
Twilight
the fine
right.
Washington.
Robert
film
Pattinson.
Yeah. So when that anyway, yeah, this was a lot of things stack up for me for why I have an irrational. I'll use that word specifically. Enjoyment of this game, such that when you're like, "What's it about?" I'm like, I don't know, everything. Like it's
Life, love,
life. Yeah, like I don't know. I feel like I'm not even sitting here saying I know too much about it or like I have some encyclopedic knowledge of it, but it's like Final Fantasy VII when you play it, and it's like it's about a merry band of ecological terrorists that like stop the world from ending from a weird clone of an alien who wants to meet.
Stop the podcast if you haven't heard that one before.
Sure. Yeah, but then you dig in and it's like, no, it was like Sakaguchi's mom died, and it's this weird treatment of like death, basically, and like grief. And
Final Fantasy 9.
Yeah, but it's better than 9. Like 7 is, but anyway.
Just here to have fun.
Look, like the top level stuff of 9 is fine. It's when you get to the game it starts to like not be a thing I like.
Gino's gonna bring his gun too.
That's fine.
That's at the end of this. So
we're at these are the ones, right? Like this series was so good for this specific like 10-year window that you could say like any one of these is your favorite game, and I'm not gonna like necessarily dock you points. Like they're all amazing.
I mean, yeah, that's something to like. So like, from 4 all the way to 10, this franchise was
unbelievably good.
Was there, right?
Yes.
Like, say what you will, and I know that I can't believe I'm going to say this. I might be the biggest defender of 4 for whatever reason. I just like the way that game is so I've played a significant amount of it. Okay. I like how distinctly Japanese that game is, and when we play it, that will make more sense in context. Maybe Jeff understands what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
But
7's pretty Japanese.
From 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, every single person on this podcast is a defender of 8. So if you're just tuning in, go fuck yourself if you think 8 is bad. 9 and 10. We're spanning 1, 2, like 3 console generations, 4 or whatever. This franchise was on it. It had its finger on the pulse. It was belting these games out, sometimes in like a year and a half, like just insane output and just like achieving things technically that no other developer was able to achieve on the platforms that they were working on. And this is going to come up. Yeah.
And then they got high on their own supply and made a movie.
That happened. And then also
Fashion Man became in charge of it.
Yeah. The people who actually made the Final Fantasy franchise, like finger on the pulse, constantly on it, just left. And then there was a void. But keep going, Jeff.
I mean, you said it pretty well there. Like, it's an unbelievable stretch. I feel like a majority people, the person who hosts the show doesn't fall in this crease, but that's okay. We're talking about statistics here. Like a sigma 1 of people in either direction is probably going to tell you 6 or 7 is like where the series crested, like an absolute crest. And for me, all the other parts of 6 coming into my life when it did and how it did that like make it more meaningful personally, which was to be clear, well after the game came out. I came to this game in like 2003, 2004. It is a incredible set of vignettes and sequences and character portraits that come together, made by a team that has mastered its platform and its mode of conveying stories so far beyond everyone else in class at the time. It feels like a victory lap. Like the entire game feels like it knows it is so good that it just nonstop stunts on you. The initial point that we chose to stop this episode, Gino pulled out, and at the time I probably should have said we should maybe play a little more, but I think the reason that you chose this spot specifically is because the opening of this game is so fucking dense with good shit that other games accomplish that much in like 12, 15 hours. This one, it's like 3 or 4 hours in and you've done so much stuff, and all of it is so weird and bespoke and good for the most part. It's unbelievable.
I joked on it on another podcast, but it might be the single best introduction or opening sequence I've ever played in my entire life. to a video game, period. And I'm not even like saying to the Final Fantasy. It might be my favorite introductory level or just start to a video game ever.
Like, I think Outer Wilds probably has a better intro, but I'm one of those people about Outer Wilds too. So like it to my main like thesis, I guess, of this episode is I don't even know if it's worth talking about this game because it is so fucking good. I don't know what I could add to the conversation. Like, I don't know. It's like me telling you, yeah, you should go see the Mona Lisa. Like, I don't know. I don't feel that way about the Mona Lisa, to be clear. But people who do, it's sort of like, I don't know, like, I've seen a photograph of this online. It's like, no, man, you really got to go and like spend an hour looking at it. It's like, do you? Fucking do you?
To settle things in, like 6, it follows a merry band of revolutionaries, the Returners, clashing against an evil empire, the Gustalian Empire, and stuff kind of expands from there. But it's one of the only games in the FF series that has no true protagonist, no true singular protagonist. The game follows each of the party members as the kind of primary protagonist for different parts of the game. There are people who blink in and out of the story. Like, very early on, you're following Terra, who is a young woman who is gifted with magic.
Which I think that for people who play this game now and have already interacted with Apocrypha or any of these, for example, like that horrible mobile game that Gino is addicted to, or the trading card game, which also Gino is addicted to, or, Theater Riven, which Jeff is addicted to, like all of these supporting media that have come out since, I think that these supporting media have like presented Terra as the protagonist of this game when she is not. And I think
she's one of them.
She's one of them, but she's also not the protagonist. The way
game
that
follows
they
her,
now present.
It follows Locke, the thief. It follows Edgar at times. It follows Sabin. Like, there are a bunch of characters that get to be the protagonist for stretches of this game, some longer than others. But I think it is truly an ensemble cast.
Yeah.
Similar.
There's
like
that part
9,
with Banning coming up.
9 does this a little bit as well. I think
Final Fantasy
9?
13 does it too.
13 does it too, but 13's a piece of hot garbage. I think that 7 doesn't really. 7 pretty much, until Cloud kind of goes out of the picture towards the end of the game. 7's pretty straightforward. 8 is similar.
8 has that weird bit where you split the party in half.
Yeah, you split the party in half a little bit, and then there's also the Laguna stuff. But like, 6 is the most ensemble that this series has ever gotten.
And it does a good job managing that ensemble. I mean, you talked about it. When you compare this to a game like Final Fantasy 13, where there's an ensemble that you're supposed to get to know more about as you play the game, so is that there's these like character-specific set pieces. This game does the ensemble format probably better than some modern games that utilize the ensemble format.
100%.
It's an ensemble where maybe not every single character, but most of the characters are the protagonist of their own game that is in this game, which I think gets to like the differences in how they play and stuff.
Yes.
Like this game contains games, and the
Correct.
games it contains are, if not like necessarily best in class, all pretty good games in their own respect. Again, it's just stunting. Like, it just nonstop stunting for like it's most of its runtime.
Yeah, I think this game, it's 6, 9, 10 to a certain extent. Like, these are games that every character is, they have interiority. They are going to grow. They are going to get large focuses. They're going to get their moments in the sun, and they're mechanically very diverse in a way that some of the other games, there's 6 is really the apex. 6 and I think 9 are kind of the ones that every character is their own unique archetype. They've got a little bit of flexibility to them mechanically eventually, but they all play differently because of their central mechanics, and it makes every character feel distinct and feel like there's a reason to have them in the party. So
on top of that, didn't you all feel like this was probably one of the best paced Final Fantasy games we've ever played? Because I felt like pacing here,
it's brisk.
And I know Gino he's going to argue in support of Final Fantasy 9, but like it's still up there. Like I think that still my preference is I really like the pacing of Final Fantasy X, even when there are quiet moments. But this might be the best paced Final Fantasy game we've played in a while.
Yeah,
like our number one complaint, even when we were playing games, even when we were playing 5, which I think is the last truly good Final Fantasy game we played, which was like almost 2 years ago.
Yeah,
because we've been fucking about.
Opera Omnia is fine. You take that back.
It's not a real Final Fantasy game, Gino. That's my point there.
Yeah, it's definitely well paced. So kind of settling in, the game begins with Terra, who is this magically gifted girl who is walking atop a mech with 2 other mechs going to this town called Narsh to claim an Eidolon. Or an Esper, sorry, Esper. That's the summon name in this game.
Yeah.
But she is being mind controlled by Biggs and Wedge, who you might remember from Star Wars, and then also in several Final Fantasies after this, they use Biggs and Wedge as kind of recurring side characters. Though usually they aren't the same person. You spend the introductory sequence on this mech. They tell you about the War of the Magi. There was like this magical war before the events of the game. So magic has basically been wiped off the planet.
Yeah.
With the exception of these mechs that have magitech. So they have magic baked into them that allows them to do magic-leaning stuff. And you're basically just rampaging through Narsh to start. And it becomes clear that Terra is brainwashed. She's being mind-controlled by a crown that makes her do what the other 2 command. You eventually get to the Esper after just destroying the resistance forces in Narsh. And when you get to the Esper, it knocks the crown off of Terra, setting her free and setting off the events of the game. She gets taken aside and rescued by just a regular townsperson in Narsh, and she is introduced to Locke, the thief, or treasure hunter as he calls himself, who is a member of the Returners, a resistance group against the Gestalian Empire that Terra was fighting for when she was on the giant mech, and the adventure kind of spirals out from there. So the first 2 characters we get Terra. Oh, and before this even happens, you have to, I guess you escape Narsh, and there's an underground section where you control a Moogles. Moogles come and help defend Terra and Locke, and you split up into 3 different parties of Moogles to fight enemies as they are slowly trying to make their way to Terra. So, like, the game, Jeff, from your perspective, like, stunting. What did you think of this section, which is very early?
Yeah, it sort of throws you for a loop. It's like, what the fuck is even going on here? I always try to, I don't know how many times I've played this sequence of this game over my lifetime, but like several. And it's fun to try to keep as many of them as alive as you can. You can just treat them like mooks, pretty much. I don't think there are long-term consequences for just like suicide attacking with these moogles necessarily. I don't know. I've tried to, do it. So I'm basically running around with Locke as much as I can and absorb as much XP as possible to get ahead of the curve. But it's neat. They threw tower defense in this game in like the first 30 minutes for some reason.
Yeah.
It's not like my favorite part by a long shot, but it's a neat idea.
It's such a flex. It's just like, hey, we're going to do 3 parties that you're going to split up and you're going to position them on this battle grid. It's like Fort Condor. It's like we're going to do a proto Fort Condor from FF7 just as a throwaway thing that I don't think this game even does again.
And then I guess it's neat because like mechanically what it's doing is each one of these moogs has like abilities from a character you're going to have later.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like you can sort of be like, what the hell does this do? Oh, what does this do? What does this do? That's crazy. These Moogles have all these abilities, and then you start unlocking characters who have those things. It's like, oh,
I thought
it's
they
like
just all had the weapons of those characters. I didn't realize they had like Bushido.
Got a weird array of abilities, if I'm not mistaken. I did just replay this like twice again. That's how I remember it. And as we all know, it's a perfect way of keeping info.
I think that part of the impact of this game and its introduction is kind of lost to time forever. You have to remember, and I had a friend of mine who is significantly older than me explain this, but if you had been following this game, following this franchise 1 to 2, which was actually 4, to this, the idea of magic is dead and you're in this like technological world and you're kind of like the fire bringers or the fire keepers of like magic. Like this was a huge shock. It's a huge genre break because the Final Fantasy franchise up to this point has been a very traditional, and yeah, 4 and 5 kind of play around with it at times, but like this was a genre shift, a significant one, and it was a shock to play. That's part of the reason why Final Fantasy VI really was a shock to people who are used to this franchise being just, the little brother or little sister to Dragon Quest in particular.
Yeah, for sure. So we escape from the caves of Narsh, which then takes us to, you can go to the adventuring school, which is a nice, like the beginner's house is a nice thing that they've had in some of these FF games.
Yeah.
And then we go to Figaro, which is the first village we kind of go to. It is run by Edgar. He's the king. It's a town. It's a castle in the middle of the desert. And Edgar is shielding Terra from, it's not Galbadia, it's the Gestalian Empire, who comes a-knockin'. They send a clown named Kefka to come and get Terra from Edgar because they believe that Figaro is harboring her as a fugitive from their forces as a defector.
And this is another part of the game that is kind of ruined to time. You spend a significant portion of this game thinking, that Kefka is a goon, and that's kind of forever ruined. Like that plot twist later down the road is forever ruined. It's like the rosebud of this Final Fantasy series.
Yes, the game, Kefka is a joke. He is a comedic relief character at this point in the game. Like characters speak about General Leo as the big bad, the heavy for the Gestalian Empire, and Kefka is kind of like, oh right, there's that weird clown guy.
Which that comic relief, and I know that we've had this talk before, that comic relief idea of Kefka in the original version, in the Japanese version, Kefka was not necessarily that. This is a work of Ted Woolsey.
Tell me about Woolsey.
Oh, Jeff.
For those who don't know about Ted Woolsey.
So Ted Woolsey was the person who single-handedly translated almost everything for Square Enix during the Super Nintendo era. So he was the chief of localization for the North American branch of Squaresoft from 1991 to 1996. He was in charge of Secret of Mana, I think the first Breath of Fire, Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger, and I think Secrets of Evermore. And then he made the best Mario RPG game, Super Mario RPG, better than that fucking Paper Mario horror shit. And he kind of left the industry in terms of translation services after that. And I think he's still working in I think he still works for like Microsoft and is like, he's like now like ahead of first party publishing because you see his name pop up for games like Ori and the Blind Forest and like Dust and Elysian Tale.
Huh.
But actually, no, he's back in Microsoft because he was working on State of Decay, and then they bought State of Decay, and so he's back in Microsoft. But Ted Woolsey, there were two schools of thought during localization, which was, and Gino can actually talk more about this, which was in the early time of translation, especially in the fan translation, do you interpret the kanji literally, or do you interpret the kanji figuratively? And Ted Woolsey said, actually, you're both wrong. The best way to go about it is to strike a middle ground, preserve the spirit of the text, and also still try to keep it as close to the source material as possible. But the other thing that people forget about is Ted Woolsey was working with a lot of significant content restrictions. Like Nintendo of America was super strict, far more strict than Nintendo anywhere else in terms of what they were allowing in terms of content. So bathhouses got changed into like saunas and you know, scenes where even like the slightest bit of buttocks or like even the crudest bit of humor had to be replaced, which is why Kefka says later in a scene, son of a submariner. In the Japanese text, apparently he says son of a bitch. And so he made lemonade out of lemon. I mean, literally made chicken salad out of chicken shit. And so, Gino, I was going to turn it to you. Why is it that you would not want to interpret kanji literally rather than figuratively?
Well, just Japanese in general. Like, it's not just kanji, which is just one of the 3 written character sets that you can have in Japanese. Like, Japanese is just a different way of expressing yourself in a lot of cases. Like, there are things that if you translate them literally do not make sense in English grammar as well. Like, for example, asking someone to do something for you, like, that's not the way a sentence would be structured to say, could you do this for me? You say, like, can you give me the action of doing this thing? Which, you know, if you translated it in a more figurative way, like, you would say, oh, this person asked for this to be done for them. But if you translate it very literally, like, they use the word to give, like, grafted onto action words. Like, the translation just does not work directly. So there are a lot of cases where if you don't interpret things through the lens of the language you're translating into, Japanese won't make sense. It won't. It not only will not work grammatically, it will also sometimes deflate the overall meaning and the vibe that you're trying to get across. Like, you know, another good example is Teddy in Persona. For those who have played Persona 4, Teddy ends almost all of his words with the word kuma, which is bear. It's the word bear in Japanese. But that's because at the end of Japanese words, there can be emphasis characters that are thrown on to kind of let you know what the vibe of the sentence was. Like, ne means isn't it? Yo means yes, very forcefully. Ka is a question. So, like, listing for what that character is at the very end of a word, or like ze is one that's like super extreme, like I'm in an anime, I'm going to say ikuze because I'm really cool. So kuma is like I'm a bear, so everything I say ends with bear because I'm a cutesy character. So in order to translate that properly, if you just have him say bear at the end of all of his sentences, it's not going to make any fucking sense in English. But the way that they captured that vibe was to have multiple lines of Teddy's dialogue be bear puns. So they just make him bring everything back to being a bear all the time. Like jokes about claws, jokes about fur, jokes about, you know, I'm barely listening to you. Like, they do it that way, and it evokes the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because the translation here is he's a bear, so he talks about bears. We need to work that in. But the way to do it to make it resonate in English is different than how you would do it. In Japanese, you can just add this word at the end of the sentence, and everyone gets it.
It's
Sure.
funny you mention Atlas in that, because Atlas USA literally has like a picture of Ted Woolsey as like, this is how we approach translation. The other important thing to recognize is one of the reasons why Woolsey later said that when he literally translated the script from Japanese to English, he realized that, I got to cut 25% of this because the amount of text in here doesn't fit on a Super Nintendo cart. And so
That's
he actually
another
had
thing.
to he had to change the text literally. Like, he had to actually fix the translation just so as that it could fit on the Super Nintendo, because that one-to-one swap doesn't work.
Japanese is a
with, like,
denser language.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's a denser language.
and
it's
like
figurative.
the use of personal pronoun, like, I don't know, translating a sentence or having a conversation with someone and you're being even remotely polite, you're addressing them by their family name, like, constantly. Like, I don't know, it'd be like if I was like, yeah, like me and Greco-san are like hanging out, like No, like you wouldn't just say like me and him. That doesn't work. Usually when you're like very, 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 very familiar with someone and like want to do something for emphasis, you'll throw in like an anata, like a you. It's like, oh shit, like he's talking to
Yeah.
me. Like so,
They're
like
close enough to say the word you,
Yeah. So
and it's not rude.
Just to stack that level of density, yeah, it just becomes preposterous. So
Now I mentioned all of this because
I meant
I'm
so
sorry,
in terms of
go ahead.
density, I meant literally like you need fewer characters to say the same thing in Japanese
yes,
as in
yeah,
English.
yeah, precisely.
I say all of this because this was all done for Final Fantasy VI because there was a perception that the Western audience wouldn't get this game at all. And so, and remember, this was issued as Final Fantasy 3. Because 4 was 2, 6 was 3 originally. And this is 1 year after Final Fantasy, no, Breath of Fire. This came out at the same time as Breath of Fire, but Breath of Fire came out earlier. Square Enix is starting to realize that they could make a significant amount of money in the Western audience. And for whatever reason, and we don't need to do the full investigation here or now, Square Enix is doing better than Squaresoft. Sorry, I keep making this mistake. Squaresoft is doing significantly better in the West and Europe, North America and Europe, than the multiple times that Enix tried to translate Dragon Quest and Dragon Warrior into English, which even Jeff has talked about in previous things. They put everything into Final Fantasy VI overseas. They did literally everything. It was on the pages of Nintendo Power. They really wanted this game to do well outside of Japan, which, yes, there were some early cracks at it, and of course we have to give credit where credit is due. 4 and 1 certainly were big hits outside of Japan, but you didn't see a Japanese publisher outside of maybe Sega really put this amount of time and effort to really make a JRPG a big. It was like JRPGs were a niche genre for the longest time. Like, I think that we've kind of forgotten about that. Is like, it was a niche genre. It was like a subgenre of CRPGs, and this was a big deal. Like, this game was huge. I remember, my friends talking about it in a way where it's like, Final Fantasy 6? Or I'm sorry, Final Fantasy 3? Like, this was huge. And you can tell that a lot of care was put in. Like, this is Square really trying to put their best foot forward in a lot of ways, is what I mean to really, really suggest. Is like, they really wanted this game to be good.
For sure. And you can see it in the translation. And like, this is all coming up because, like we said, Kefka, when he shows up, the Kefka that we got is in many ways better than the Kefka that Japan got because of this additional attention to translation and what they like. The Kefka's, I think, a pretty straight up bad guy.
He's just a straight up bad guy. He's just a
scenery chewing villain in
he's
the original version.
Yeah, he's just a scenery chewing villain. But our version of Kefka's is the one that we have today.
Yes, Woolsey's translation was so good that now all Kefka stuff is Woolsey translation of Kefka, even into Japanese.
Yeah. I don't know.
So, yeah, like this first introduction to Kefka, we see, the comedy, and we also see the violence. So, like, Kefka he's always marrying this cartoonish, buffoonish act with just wanton destruction. And after he comes and says, hey, turn Terra over to us or else, Edgar's like, nah, I like girls, and also I don't know who you're talking about. They light Figaro, Edgar's town, on fire, and you make an escape on chocobos. After Figaro Castle, there's a little cave, a Figaro cave that you need to go through. It's just a dungeon, you get through it pretty fast. Then you go to South Figaro. You, I guess, don't need to go to South Figaro, but I did, at this point. There's a bunch of hidden items you can get there. You can find some secret rooms. There's a dude in town who's clearly conspiring to betray the town to the Gestalian Empire. And then you go into the mountains to find Edgar's brother, Sabin, who is a monk who's been trading under a master monk. And he joins your party. You fight, I think, your first real boss.
I mean, technically, we had Ymir as a
snail.
boss. There's the
Yeah, but
snail. There's
snail,
the
you have a
guard
super
leader
unit,
with
though.
the 2 silver lobos is technically
Yeah.
a boss too.
But,
But I think
This-
Vargas is the first boss where you don't have super units.
Vargas? Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
I guess
Sabin,
so.
as it turns out, is kind of a super unit.
That's
But-
true.
Yeah.
Sabin's so strong. And if you know how to use his, and I think now we should talk about kind of the differentiations between the characters, because once you get
Yes.
Sabin, you defeat Vargas, who's the son of Sabin's master. Now you've got full party slots. Terra's differentiating factor is she has a magic command. She's the only character that can use magic right now, and she gains magic as she levels up. Locke has the ability to steal because he's a treasure hunter. As you steal things, it gives you access to equipment earlier than you should have access to it. You have Sabin, you have Edgar, sorry. Edgar and Sabin, they're twins. Edgar has a tool command, which lets him use specialized items that only he can use that will do specialized attacks. So they're just super attacks that he has access to.
And they attack the entire enemy party. They
Most of
are so many of the abilities in this game. I want to be like, they're game breaking, they're crazy, but it's kind of crazy. He has one that just which I did not use early on when I started playing this game 16 years ago or whatever. That just turns everyone into rage mode. They just start attacking themselves, and it affects pretty much, if you have a mob of 4 enemies, at least 2 or 3 of them are going to get got each time you use that.
Yeah, he has a confuse beam.
Yes,
A noise
yeah.
the noise blaster will confuse all of your enemies, and they'll all start attacking each other. He's got a bio cannon that does poison damage. He's got an auto crossbow that does good damage to all enemies.
Yeah.
He's just super powerful because of it.
If there's one, go ahead, finish your sentence.
Oh no, and he keeps scaling the more equipment you can get him.
If there is one negative thing to say about this, is that one, to go from 5 to 6 chronologically, I can't help but think that it's kind of a bummer that this franchise basically shit cans the job system. And now we're back to 4's notion of not tabula rasa, but we give the characters are each their own distinct jobs, and you will get what you want out of the characters that we give you. There is a bit of bittersweet. I do think that the characters are good, and I like the mechanical differences between them. That said, mechanically, in some ways, 6 feels like a step backwards in terms of 5, the variability quotient there. 2, and this is...
Oh, go ahead.
2, I don't think that these character differentiating points, the class differences, opens up fast enough. You mentioned how Terra's the only one who can cast magic. I played a little bit more of this. She really doesn't open up. The magic system doesn't open up until you get your first Esper, which I think is way too late for when it starts. That actually happens, which makes certain characters a bit slower to play in this game's interpretation of the ATB system. Just a little bit slower than what I would like.
Yeah. So I would just say this series has had a just never-ending battle between customizability and distinction, mechanical distinction between characters. This game veers closer to the school of distinction instead of the school of open-endedness. 7, 8, very open-ended, but almost nothing distinct about the characters except limit breaks and whether they're ranged or not. 9 goes even further into distinction, where it's got characters that all they are is their role. They can dabble a little bit, but it's just because they have abilities within their role that let them kind of cross-cut in terms of what they do. But 6 kind of straddles the line, and in this section we played through, we're not going to get to the part where we get more opening up of the characters.
Sure.
But I do think it's interesting that they've made, like, Sabin is the character that I think opens this system up to how wild it can get for characters, because Sabin's a fighting game character.
Yeah, so this I think is a particularly neat Square was at the top of their game thing, because it's like maybe a little overstated that he is like a total fighting game character, but this is like a perhaps a demerit that it like pulls you out a little bit, but like Square's in conversation with other game makers of the time, right? So Sabin only exists the way he does because of the success of Street Fighter 2 and perhaps specifically its very good Super Famicom port.
Yes.
But they looked at that and, you know, perhaps had fun playing Street Fighter 2 and were like, how could we get a little bit of that flavor in here? He sort of back sweetens the game to an early 90s spot in a very specific way, I guess. Like, this can only exist in like the peak fighting game period of human history, I guess. But yeah, I didn't even realize how good he was. Like, you know, like famously he can suplex a train, but the motherfucker starts with a Hadoken.
Yeah.
Like, not a Hadoken. It's like a Kamehameha. It's like a one-shot kill on like everything for most of the first chunk of this game. And he just has that. That's just an inherent ability.
Yeah, and
it's crazy.
There's no good reason to pick attack with Sabin.
Yes.
His punch rush is stronger than his attack. His aura beam or aura cannon is stronger than most of your other attacks. They cost no MP to do. So like his blitz mechanic, as long as you know how to execute the move. Now the downside is if you fuck up on executing the move, you won't get anything. You'll just skip his turn.
Totally.
So there's supposed to be like this trade-off between execution and power. But you know, if you're good at executing the moves, there's no trade-off. He's just absurdly powerful. And if you like, also the game doesn't tell you what like the inputs are for some of these
Right.
until you do them. So if you don't have a guide, you also didn't know how to do blitzes. So there was, you know, a little bit of you need to go word of mouth.
Yeah, there is a menu in his blitzes do have the moves enumerated on them, at least the first like couple of them. I imagine there may be hidden ones, but
I forget.
You can just open the start menu.
Does the menu show you those after you've used the move the first time, or does it always show you as soon as you unlock?
They are all in there as far as I remember.
You can tell that this is where the character differentiating special moves in Chrono Trigger came from. Also, this inspired the character differentiating moves in Chrono Trigger. They pulled this idea from here and put it into Chrono Trigger. Sure. For reference, could I ask you guys what you set your battle system to, like your battle style and also your battle speed to? Were you
battle
weight?
Speed always topped up and
speed highest as possible.
I had speed at 1, which is the fastest, and then I also set it to weight.
Yeah, so that's such that this game, and I guess these games have a difficulty toggle. That's it, right? It's the active versus weight thing. And I'm a weight person because, I'm a
I have
content
analysis
tourist.
paralysis, which is, I know that I have a reputation of not being the hugest fan of the ATB system. And part of the reason is that all of these menus give me analysis paralysis, and I usually always sit around like thinking about my moves way longer. And I hate it when these games don't allow me to set the battle style to weight, and I get punished for trying to mull over all of my options, which the earliest versions of some of these games did do. And I hate it when the games punish me for giving me all of these options and I take time to mull over them. So that's why I always set my game to weight and not active. And that is where a lot of my angst towards the ATB system in general is, where I have always argued, I think using an item should not be penalized to the ATB system. I should pop that shit off sooner. I should pop that shit off immediately. Fucking hate it when I have to when I use a potion and I have to wait for the character to fucking use that shit. I hate that. And I just don't like the micromanagement of the turn-based ATB system. I just feel that it's fiddly. And I get that that's an unpopular opinion, but setting it to weight at least deals with a lot of my problems with the ATB system in general. And especially when a lot of these character classes haven't fully opened up. Like Terra, I always felt like I knew what I needed out of her before she gets all of her special shit. But man, do some of these characters play a little slower than I'd like. Especially with some of these classes not being where they need to be, or not quite where they need to be, or where you want them to be.
Yeah, I usually use weight. I think I've been using weight in this one just because for characters like Sabin, who you have to do an input, having enemies wail on you while you're doing the input is rough. And for characters like Edgar, who have an entire sub-menu, like, you don't want your characters to necessarily get fucked up just because their mechanic involves them.
Yeah.
Going into a sub-menu or doing some special inputs, or, having a lot of moves to pick from, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I do think they surrender on this specific ground by even giving you the option, but it is pretty clear when you dig around and look at the actual trajectory of this shit that I think active is how they want you to play.
Yes.
Which, for better or worse. And that's there is a line from Final Fantasy to Final Fantasy IV, the introduction of the active time battle shit, to something like Secret of Mana, to something like Kingdom Hearts, where the entire goal since the mid to late 80s was, we want it to be a big punch up that you're actively a part of. Like Final Fantasy VII Remake is kind of the apotheosis of what I think they've been wanting to do in their hearts for a very long time. So active feels like the canon way to do it. But if that was true, they would have just not given you the option.
But here's my problem with the ATB system in general. It's not necessarily the timed aspect. It's more the fact that in general, Final Fantasy combat isn't challenging 90% of the time, and that you're really 90% of the time dealing with trash mobs, dealing with goons, dealing with shit that just pops up because you took 3 steps. And fiddling through these menus, especially for certain classes and certain characters, just adds time. And it's not that bad in 6. I want to emphasize that it's not that bad in 6. But again, I have a bit of a perception, especially on Giant Bomb, as being someone who doesn't like the ATB system. My problem with the ATB system, I can accept it in the classical context. I have always argued that the ATB system overstayed its welcome, and that Square continued to stick with it rather than innovate with it. This is part of the reason why I've always argued that Final Fantasy IX and its conditional timed-based system, that should have been the direction for the franchise rather than 12.
You mean 10?
Yeah, 10. 10 should have been, like, continue to just do a different version of turn-based or time-based. Like, do something different. And I just think that this stuck around a little bit longer than it needed to. Especially when the franchise went to, like, 3D and we're exploring all of these worlds, and then here's this bolted-on menu system that doesn't technically feel like it's in service of these fully realized 3D worlds sometimes, especially in the PS1 era.
If you, back it all the way back, like, what is the purpose of the system is, like, to differentiate between, like, Final Fantasy I, speed is not, like, a meaningful stat generally, because, like, your 4 characters attack, all the enemies attack, you go back and forth. Final Fantasy IV forward, speed, like an individual's like dexterity, matters in the sense that their meter fills farther. So by the time you get to 10, you can meaningfully convey that a character is faster by just letting them go, earlier on in that totem system that they have, like earlier in the line. Now it's just a matter of like Tifa is a fast character in Final Fantasy VII Remake because her attacks are fast and she moves fast. So like the entire purpose of this is like to express meaningfully one stat of like the 10 or 12 or whatever the hell it is that a character has. And I don't know, that's so much hand wringing, if you think about it, is spent on how do we meaningfully convey that like Locke is faster than Sabin.
Yeah.
And that's the game. Basically, like a third of this game is spent being like, yeah, Locke sure is fast compared to Edgar.
And I just feel like, again, I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. I think that this and the lack of that Final Fantasy V job system, it's a real goddamn shame that it dies and it doesn't come back. I want to just say that, and we can move on and stop bringing it up. But
it's been noted. Now twice. If you say it one more time, and we have to play Final Fantasy V again.
Yeah,
then we have to play Final
but anyways,
Fantasy
no,
V
I
again.
feel like there are legitimate criticisms of 6 that I wanted to bring up, at least before we...
I can hear them.
So once we escape from the mountain, we then meet the returners properly. You meet Bannon, their leader, and they ask Terra if she wants to join the resistance, and she's like, sure, dog. At which point you are raided by the Gestalion. My brain is just like Galbadia because I've played 8 so many times. They're too similarly named. The Gestalions find their base. You have to escape on a raft. On the river, you get some nice like left or right choices, and that leads you to either progress on the river raft ride or go down an eddy that loops you around.
Sure. You say you go down a river, but that is one of 3 potential things that can happen. It should be noted, because this is the point where the party splits.
Not yet. No, it's after the river that the party splits.
Is it?
Right?
Yeah, it's a little bit after, I thought.
Yeah, you fight Ultros and then the party splits.
Okay, my bad.
Okay, before we get to the Ultros, because this is near our stopping point, Jeff and I also like to dog on the the Super Nintendo sound chip. This is one of the few good sounding Super Nintendo games. Wouldn't you agree, Jeff?
It's the best one by a
Terragami is good.
Terranigma.
Terranigma.
I kind of like Super Castlevania 4. I don't know.
Overall, I would say that I don't know if Gino is aware of this. Jeff and I think that the Super Nintendo sound chip sounds like ass.
I know that you have this
bad
opinion.
MIDI fucking drum sounds that synthesize. Like, this is why I support Jeff Gersman's stance on Yoshi's Island, because that game sounds like shit.
Yeah, it's a pretty bad game overall.
Yeah, it's a bad game. But anyways, no, this is like one of the best sounding Final Fantasy games in general. Like, there's
for sure.
There's reasons why the leitmotifs and certain musical orchestral music from this game has been reused and just like gutted and kind of remixed. But also
there's a
just
reason
like
why Terra's theme is like one of the iconic
one
FF
of the most
themes.
well-known sounds. Like what's the what's the band called? The Black Mages or
the Black Mages.
Yeah, this is always on their itinerary that they play. Like the songs that it's like Terra's theme, One Winged Angel, and the Battle of the Big Bridge are always
Battle of the Big Bridge, Man with the Machine Gun.
Yeah.
These are
Just
all good
a
songs.
really good sound, especially the music that plays during that intro scene when you're on the mech suits.
Getting kind of far afield. Have you guys seen the Final Fantasy Symphony show that goes around?
I've never seen it in person. I know it exists, and I've heard the music. Spotify keeps telling me, you might like this.
It is worth mentioning that all Final Fantasy music is on Spotify. If you want to sponsor us, we'll happily show you.
Oh yeah, totally.
We went to a show that me and my wife, and it was Uematsu was like literally ill, so he was unable to like show up and do like a perfunctory little bow, and everyone could like cry and thank the man. But they did it was like an hour and a half set, and they ended with the opera from this game, and they're like, thanks. And Ashley was like, well, that was really fun. I was like, oh, you don't know. Because they always inevitably then come out and they're like, oh, I guess we should do an encore. So you guys know how to say Sephiroth, right? It's like FFD. So they like sort of pantomime like, okay, so you guys be ready. So when we point at you, say Sephiroth, and then they just do like a really good One-Winged Angel. My spouse did not know that was going to happen, and it got over with her. It was very popular. at the time. So that's fun. You should go see that. They played like 2 numbers from 6, including the opera. This has a great soundtrack. It's maybe the best one on the SNES. Maybe.
On the SNES, I don't think it's the best soundtrack, but it's a very good one.
Series-wide, I don't know if it wins.
Oh, okay, sure. I was going to say, console-wise, yeah, like, Super Nintendo soundtrack is bad.
Fuzzy. It sounds like a sock. Anyway,
yeah. You compare that to the Genesis?
Yeah,
fucking
punchy, good, aggressive, good drums.
It's just, that early launch era Genesis stuff, like Strider, sounds like shit.
So,
there you go.
Fight Ultros. A thing I failed to mention. Ultros has this, and a couple fights have this going up to this point. And again, like a stunting thing. So, it's Final Fantasy combat pre-7, even kind of post-7. You're 2 ranks, right? You stand and deliver. You're facing the dude and you fight. But they fuck around with that, and they do storytelling in the battle scenes a couple times.
Right.
Where suddenly, like, a character will just run to the other side of the screen and start talking to you and be like, hey, what the hell? Like, I don't know. The first time Terra does magic in the desert, like, that's a big deal. And Edgar's like, holy shit, she's magic. And they talk to each other. And then they go below the text box, like whispering to each other or giggling to each other. And I bring this up because that was a thing that was specifically broken in SNES Mine X for like years. Because the first time I played this game, I got to that part. And then what would happen is their character sprites would just sort of like pass over the text box and everything would break for a little bit. And inevitably Terra would be like, what, like, hey guys, what's going on? And they just kind of like hop back where they were. It's like very funny physical comedy and like a Beijing opera sort of pantomime style. All these games add a lot to Beijing opera, by the way. But like there's that. The Ultros stuff is very fourth wall breaking in that way some of the time. It's just cool.
This octopus is a pervert.
Yeah, can we talk about Ultros as a pervert? He uses tentacle on Terra.
Did you know Ultros is a pervert?
Ultros is like, hubba hubba, I like the ladies. And then also, anytime you hit him with fire, he goes, no octopus soup on the menu today. And it's great.
It's
Ultros, you may remember from Kingsglaive, Final Fantasy 15.
Yeah, fuck. Yeah. Oh, right. Hey, I mean, I actually appreciated it, even though it seems to be of an era that I think we've all grown up from. We've all grown up as adults, and we look at these scenes like, oh boy, you're a Master Roshi archetype, aren't you?
Yeah. He is a Master Roshi.
But this game is dark, and there's nice. It's as if the game knows when to like, lighten things up. So here you have this boss battle that you assume is going to be a big deal, and it's a fun thing. It's a little funny thing after, we've seen war crimes and massacres, and the characters have like dealt with some shit. Like it's
hey, here's this weird pervy octopus.
Pervy octopus is here to do tentacle on Terra. There's some weird earlier. There's even some dream sequences with Terra that are kind of interesting, foreshadowing even, and it's been good. I think the only thing that I would say is that so far I think the bosses have all had it feels very rock paper scissors, because like Ultros goes down if you use fire on him, right?
Yeah. Use fire on Ultros. You need to, against Monkman, you need to use Blitz. Otherwise, he won't take damage.
Yeah.
And it's a real bummer.
And
it's more tutorialization than anything.
This is of the era, and later Final Fantasy games would use this trope to a fault, to where, because you're slowly building this party and you're slowly gaining new characters, it's almost as if every single time that you get a new character, that almost immediately transitions into a boss battle, so as that you have to practice the trope or practice the character-specific mechanic at least once.
Yeah.
And, in this game it works. The problem is that when we get to, like, Final Fantasies 12, even 9, especially 10, it's like, I'm 20 hours in. I'm still getting tutorials. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's different extremes to do that. There is, as you said, the sort of practice dummy boss mode, and then there's maybe at another end of this line, the Metal Gear sort of like, hey, did you know that you found this new piece of technology? You hold X to do this.
Or
just tell you.
Or even like Halo 1's like, all right, Chief, we're currently being attacked by these awful aliens, and there's a terrible invasion happening, and humans are dying left and right. Could you look up? Use the analog stick to look up.
Yeah.
Now look down. I can tell. Do you want to try and do this inverted? It's like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like how do you diegetically do this if you must, right?
And I think that Final Fantasy VI finds a good like balancing act with it.
Sure.
Ultros really doesn't like it when you set him on fire, and that guy doesn't like it when you use blitz on him.
Here's the thing. A crucial part to all of this, which I guess we kind of mentioned, is everything that we've gone over in terms of physical like events in this game. That's like maybe hour 4. If you've like been very leisurely to this point. It's probably more like hour 3. It might be hour 2, which I think I got there in like 2 hours 30. Right? Like this is a dense little shit for a while. Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable. Like we were talking about Suikoden 1 2 hours ago when we recorded a show about Suikoden 1. And the thing about that game is it's like reasonably dense up front. And then it's about 20 hours where the plot is like very much in the back seat and you're just kind of collecting your boys and doing kind of rote but totally fine JRPG combat. This keeps basically this same level of story density basically throughout, with like a couple down periods where you're out kind of exploring and grinding. It's crazy. Like, I don't know.
It's a 30 plus to 40. I mean, if you want to do everything, I've heard it's like a 60 to 70 hour game, and it's able to maintain this pacing for the most part.
Yeah,
which is an accomplishment.
The point we left off, you beat Ultros, and then the party gets split up into three groups, and you get to choose whose scenario you do next. So we are leaving Final Fantasy VI at the point where the game says, "Hey, let's take a little step aside. Let's have you use this mod."
Whose scenario did you guys pick, or are you interested?
I haven't picked yet.
Okay. Jeff, did you pick your scenario?
Yes, I went with the Sabin. I went train as quick as I could.
I've heard that that's the better one. I might want to replay it.
You have to do all of them, so it's
yeah.
Oh, really?
Order.
Okay,
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I thought I picked the other route. I picked Locke's route or Locke's scenario, and I
guess I'll do Terra first.
Like it. I didn't like it.
It's a weird stealth section.
Yeah.
Oh, quickly, I'm not the host of this. Hey, host, you might want to ask us what versions we're playing.
Yeah.
Touch on version differences.
What versions are you playing? I'm playing the Game Boy Advance version. What version are you playing, Jeff?
Really?
Yeah, I'm playing the GBA version.
I'm playing the original SNES cart that I physically own.
I'm playing the GBA cart that I physically own.
Hell yeah. I'm not joking. That's literally.
I want my DS. Look, my DS moves with me in a way that my PlayStation 1 copy of Final Fantasy VI doesn't.
Makes a lot of sense.
ACP, what are you using to play this game?
Playing the Android iOS port onto Steam.
Fuck. Do you always just seek out the worst version of the game so that you can play it and then complain about it?
I'm not complaining about it, but goddamn, this game looks like horseshit.
Yeah, famously so.
They massacred my boy, GIF, this one. It's unbelievable.
It's a fucking bad-looking game, dude. But there's a fast forward button.
Oh, yeah. I don't get the run button in the SNES version. You have to go buy those goddamn boots.
Oh, in the GBA version, it just quadruples your speed if you buy those boots.
Yeah, no, I'm walking.
I don't even need to buy boots. I can just press a button to go fast, double time whenever I want, and it doesn't take an equipment slot.
Yeah, that's my surprisingly main grievance with the game so far. is they bury a run command behind a equipable item, which you need to manually.
Remember when they did that in Final Fantasy V, and there was a job?
It was a job. You wanted to be a thief so you could move fast.
Yeah, it's a feature.
But boy, it looks like dog shit.
Yeah, you're doing this just in time to be too early for the new touched up.
I told Gino this, but the minute, because I don't know when we'll record the next podcast, the minute that the Pixel remaster comes out, I am willing to drop everything and convert over and start from scratch.
I'm playing the Final Fantasy III Pixel remaster, poking at it now and then. That seems like a pretty good way to play Final Fantasy III. So just in case we still haven't played that one.
We haven't.
Oh, we haven't. Oh,
we have not played 3.
Huh, that's crazy.
I seem to. We don't need to do spoilers. You should subscribe to the Deep Listens Discord. Jeff's pick is a known quantity if you're on the Discord. Wouldn't you say, Gino?
I think so.
It was going to be, more of a threat, but
I think we all know what Jeff's next pick is.
Yeah. So.
I hope it isn't.
Congratulations, owner of a 3DS. No. We're gonna play Fiat Rhythm one day. God damn it, it's a good game. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
I want to play it someday.
You should play it. You'll have a fun time.
You know what? I have to do this. You guys keep talking about something that's on topic. You guys were talking about how magnificent the fucking mech scene at the start is. I have to show you what I was looking at when I was playing that exact sequence. What it looked like. The first battle, what does it look like? This is what it looks like.
Nice, soft, round. Soft and round. I like soft and round, but boy, how.
Oh no.
Yeah. Yeah, boy, that's good. The menus look good.
Ew.
A lot of care. Bad remasters kind of topical right now with this GTA shit, but I do think we'll be talking about this.
What's weird is that Gino,
but this is something else.
Gino, back me up. The Final Fantasy IX Android port and Steam port is very good.
It's the definitive way to play it at this point.
Remaster.
It has no load times. It's got quality of life features. It preserves most of the background work in relatively good. It's still a little
the definitive
muddy,
way to play it is the Steam version with the Maguri mod. But
yeah, sure. But even then, if you don't want to go through the process of manually modding the game, you're still getting a good version of Final Fantasy IX.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
now look at this. They massacred your boy, Jeff.
What's the issue here, right? The issue is they could have done a fraction of the work, done what they needed to license a Super Nintendo emulator or a PlayStation, pick your emulator from somewhere, and just sell an existing old version of this game. And for whatever reason, they don't want to do that. And the solution is redraw do, I don't know, literally
anything?
Infinitely more work.
Here's another one. Here's what it looks like during cutscenes.
Yeah.
Where it jail bars the side.
I hate this.
They're just poorly redrawn sprites in a really shitty style that I don't know who was pleased by it.
I love Locke's little belly, though.
It is cute.
Look at this little guy. Look at his little chub.
They specifically go from SNES sprites to SD looking sprites, chibi, super deformed kind of look. It's bad.
Why is Edgar pregnant?
Go to my website,
This is where Jeff and I explain what the Omegaverse is to Gino.
No, thank you. On this,
Jeff got that. You got that, didn't you? You fucking sicko.
On this note, we will call this podcast to a close. Thank you, ZP.
Back in my day, I could have reported someone like Gino and Pete to Joseph McCarthy.
Thank you.
Not anymore.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to play more of this very good game.
So the next section we will be stopping at is the end of the floating continent.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's go. We did our preamble. We talked about Ted Woolsey. Next up, we are going to torch through this game.
Okay.
So thank you, listeners. Reminder, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. You can also support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens. Till next time, peace.
Break it down.